Hello everyone and good morning. Welcome to the second class on Translation 2. Today I am going to talk about chapter 5 in the book, and the focus will be on the translation of media. I first start as usual with an introduction, then I will talk a little bit about translating media and journalism into Arabic. And because newspapers are the major outlet of media distribution, I focus a little bit on media, and because they were the first form of news dissemination also. I will look at the headlines because they are also a major component of a news story. We will look at the grammar of the headlines. We'll look at the vocabulary and how they are different from normal vocabulary. After that, we will go for examples from translation and trans-editing. We will also get acquainted with what is trans-editing, what is gatekeeping in translation, simply because a translator is not, when you work in the media, you are not a pure translator. You do some other things besides your own job as a translator. These are important to know, because I don't want you to go to work in the media and then you are surprised that you are doing something rather than translation. We will focus on certain terminology, why terminology is important to know as a profession. Media has its own terminology and we need to know how to deal with terminology in the field. Translating headlines into Arabic, this is a practical bit of the presentation. Ambiguity in headlines. Headlines are site of contestation, ideological, political, and suspense. So a headline is sometimes written on purpose to be ambiguous. How you decipher ambiguity in headline is something you are going to learn also. Media terminology, I here look at selected media terms with their Arabic equivalents, like feature, like story, like lead, like reporter, correspondent, and the nitty-gritty nuances between these terms. But first, let me quote a very important person who wrote something interesting when it comes to media translation, not media translation, media writing. There is this assumption between translators or writers that media translation is part of or type of technical translation. And that's true, it is technical. But again, as we've mentioned before in chapter 3, media translation also, although it is part of technical translation, but it also needs a lot of qualities, a lot of style, a lot of wit in order to produce a text that attracts the eyes of the readers. We will talk about this, but let us see the quote by McLuhan. He's a major writer in media. All the new media, including the press, are art forms. Note that he stresses this is an art form. Media form is an art form, which have the power of imposing, like poetry, their own assumptions. The new media are not ways of relating to the old real world. They are the real world. They reshape what remains of the old world at will. This is, my point here is that you need to learn how to understand the language of the media. And there is a lot of work done before a text is out. I now start with the introduction. These chapters offer an overview of the definition of media, the formation and nature of media texts and the news headlines, followed by situating media in Arabic translation. Constituting a burden on the translator from English into Arabic, headlines ambiguity is also touched upon. Towards the end, the chapter tackles media terminology with Arabic equivalents of a number of specialized media terms. Media is the plural of medium. medium وسيلة, which is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as a method of communication or entertainment, for example, television, radio, or the internet. Therefore, the hypernym media can encompass journalism, which indicates the occupation in which specialists, i.e. journalists, produce reports and disseminate information. Usually when you talk about journalism, you talk about newspapers, written form. Media is wider than journalism. It includes everything, including the internet, and you have the term social media. Facebook, Twitter, these are all media. What is circulated in the media, especially the electronic media, is read more than any other genre today. Media is very pervasive. It follows us even in the bedroom, in everywhere you go. Media is chasing you with news, with updates, etc., as are you experiencing right now in this moment of history. A translator thus has to be familiar with the working of dominantly cited media outlets around the world, starting with the major news agencies such as Associated Press, Agence France Presse, Reuters, and other main media outlets such as the BBC and CNN. And also other famous journalistic organizations such as The Independent and The Guardian, The New York Times, The Washington Post, etc., etc. Media discourse is subsumed under technical writing, as we've mentioned before, and that's true. The technicality aspect in the media discourse may lie in two areas: the area of terminology, feature, news story, report, headline, okay? And the area of typology. So we have the area of terminology and the area of typology, types of headlines, stories of the field. In other words, the difference between media texts and other texts is in the design and taxonomy. Media texts are produced in certain form, columns, tabloid, and characterized by being expository, non-imaginative, non-argumentative language. And this, by the way, can be debated, but because media is about news, it is supposed to be expository. Expository means just to tell, to narrate a story without any intervention, no argumentation, no imagination, okay? You produce solid facts, hard news. They call it sometimes hard news stories. What is expository? Basil Hatem and Ian Mason has their own definition of this. It is a reasonably detached account of the situation. Detached means you cover a situation, you cover a story, you tell a story with disinterest. You don't have any interest in injecting it with anything of your own imagination or standpoint, where the topic sentence sets the scene, unlike in argumentative texts where the focus is on situation management, not situation monitoring, and where the topic sentence is to be set the tone. So in expository texts, which are news stories, we are about only to set the scene. We give the situation as it is, okay? And here you talk about the motto of all media outlets. They say, we put you in the picture, أن تعرف الحقيقة أولا, okay? Media language is intended to reach out to people from all walks of life. This is very important. As a translator, you need to pay attention to this fact, that you are not only translating for elite. News story is meant to reach out to as many people as possible. So you have to take care when you translate from English into Arabic. A story needs to be legible, needs to be approachable by ordinary people. And here we will talk about, or we will need, what is called trans-editing, okay? Its language is to be clear, simple, and brief. The language of news must be simple and brief. Although they are eventually comparable to any literary genre in using figurative language. You can play with words, you can depend on journalists' intellectual and linguistic background, and we know that some of the most famous writers in the world started as journalists and remained as journalists. G.H. Wells, a very famous historian, he always preferred to be called a journalist. George Orwell, the writer who produced the masterpiece, The Animal Farm, in 1984, he was in fact a journalist, and he spent most of his life. Robert Fisk, with his elegant style, is a journalist as well. We also know Arab writers who enjoy elegant style, like Ahmed Bahauddin, like Muhammad Hassanin Hekel, like Tawfiq al-Hakim. Tawfiq al-Hakim was a journalist, by the way, although he was also a playwright. Okay? Hex ETL lists 6 rules, lists 6 rules for good journalistic text. All of these provide for avoiding metaphorical language, long words, passive foreign phrases, or a jargon, barbarous language. All these must be avoided as possible as you can. Why are you learning this as a translator? Because it is very important for you when you produce a text from English into Arabic to know at least the tradition of the world you are living in at the moment. Okay, here again, you are not only a translator, and it is interesting that people today do not talk about in the media, do not talk about a translator. They talk about a journalator, a word that is combined from journalist and translator. A journalator is the person who takes the news from other sources and put them in his or her own language, the way that suits the readership or that suits the recipient, or in fact that suits the commissioning party, the organization or the outlet that commissioned the translator to do the job for them. This is very important. Now you have trans-editing, you have journalator. Okay, in fact the journalator does trans-editing in addition to gatekeeping, and this is another issue. Okay. Usually print media follow different formats of their texts, mainly columns. In digital media, short segments are preferred. If you open any website, you will immediately see how different the format of a digital media text format from that you learned in academic writing about paragraphing, where a paragraph should contain at least 8 sentences. In media, in digital media, if you open the BBC website, Arabic or English, a paragraph might only be 2-3 sentences. Paragraphs are composed of 2-3 lines sometimes. Here, 2 or 3 lines suffice in order to keep the reader hooked up with the content. So the way the digital media formulate its paragraphs, in fact, is to keep the eye, to keep catching the eye of the reader. It is important also to notice that media outlets, especially well-established giants such as the BBC, the CNN, the Guardian, the New York Times, has its own glossary language usage of do's and don'ts, as well as terminology and editorial policy that should be followed by employees, including translators, whether they are journalists or translators. Okay? Sorry. So it would be beneficial if a translator is commissioned to translate a piece coming from such an outlet to familiarize herself with editorial policy of that includes translation policy. This also applies to the outlet to which you are translating. Each organization, each media organization has its own glossary that governs the production. For example, now we have certain terms circulating around. Everybody opts for a form of the term, okay? Now, in Arabic, for example, we have BBC as an example. Before it was هيئة الإذاعة البريطانية. Today in Arabic it is BBC بالعربية. Okay. in English, certain media outlets opt for certain terms, and others opt for other certain terms. Why? Because of their political orientation, or some of them believe in neutrality, some do not believe in neutrality, or some believe in neutrality in a way that suits their own objectives, etc. So we'll come to this when we go to the examples. One good thing about translation today is that you might learn of this fact that major media outlets around the world have their own Arabic versions. CNN has CNN Arabiya. BBC has BBC Arabic. Even the Washington Post, the Independent, the Guardian, these all sometimes produce certain material that is published in English, and they want the Arab people to be familiar with. Okay, any Arab world-related article might be published in the Washington Post, for example, and then a translation or a trans-edition of it is placed on the website itself. So it is good to look at these, and my advice is that it is good to have a look at how these are done. Even in technical translation, as we've seen before, Mayo Clinic, the famous clinic in America, provides information, it provides medical information in English and Arabic. And by the way, their translation is very good. So you might find it interesting and fruitful for you to learn from these bilingual websites with trans-editing in your head, because the headline in the BBC in English might differ from the headline in the BBC Arabic. Okay? When we talk about their reporting in English and Arabic, some Arabic outlets wouldn't translate the whole text from English. They might opt for what we call summative and or elective translation. Again, this is trans-editing. It is a form of trans-editing. You, as an editor-in-chief, مدير تحرير, رئيس تحرير جريدة, you might think this article is interesting and it is useful for the Arab reader to know about. But again, you feel that there are bits that are needless in Arabic, and you don't want to waste the time and the space, the time of the reader and the space of your website. You ask your translator to translate certain bits or to sum the article up for the readers without any interference with the original text. The message is maintained as possible as you can, but again, there are elements that you find needless. You don't need the writer the reader to take the trouble and read them, because they do not feed him anything. They do not stand as a beneficial aspect to the Arabic reader. So remember this: summative and elective translation. Okay. Like the rendition of any other text from English into Arabic or from Arabic into English, translating media and journalistic texts involve the following. You have to be of general knowledge on the part as a translator, okay? As a translator, you have to have general knowledge of what's going around you in the world, okay? You should be also you should be also aware of the current linguistic treatment of news in the course and the target environment. And my advice here is you follow the news and see how they treat things. We are in Corona time now, COVID-19 time. The COVID-19 time has its own discourse. And I ask my kids sometimes to make a list of the COVID-19 vocabulary. You have a lot of vocabulary. Now pandemic, now epidemic, now endemic, the latest words when Trump talked about these disinfectant, ingest. These are words that are roaming around. And stimulus, the American project of stimulus for companies. So it is good to familiarize yourself with the current situation and the linguistic treatment of this situation on both fronts, on both banks, the English and the Arabic. And this will enrich your language, and this is dealing by situation, by the way. You will never forget these types of information because they are connected in your mind with situations or events. As we have mentioned before, translation from and into media outlets is a site of ideological and editorial dynamics. Editorial dynamics is the thing that we have mentioned, gatekeeping. I don't want my readers to get acquainted with this because it contradicts my culture, it contradicts their culture, and I don't want to get challenged by the readers. My objective is to reach a wide audience. I don't want any trouble, so I don't translate certain things that are contested by the recipients. Also, ideological dynamics. By ideology, sometimes if the article is not in the favor of the media outlet orientation, then the editor-in-chief might suppress it, might brush it aside because it doesn't serve her or his aim, okay? And this aim is usually political or ideological. And here we talk about two concepts. These are gatekeeping and trans-editing. Gatekeeping signals that no piece of news is allowed in without conditions by gatekeeper, i.e. the individual or the group in power for making the decision between in or out, okay? Trans-editing is the adjustment of the target text in order to fit with the policies of the recipient outlet or the recipient readership. Trans-editing involves three functions of news, okay? Trans-editing involves three functions of news. Trans-editing which aim at producing suitable and acceptable target text. One, to meet the requirements of speed, brevity, and timelessness, okay? Also to adjust the source text to the target journalistic norms and to alter the news angles. If the focus is in the source text is the focus is on something and my focus is on something else, I highlight, I make salient what I want my readers to know of the article, okay? We have said that we have the term of journalator. Gatekeeping and trans-editing lead researchers to coin the term of journalator. The journalist who works as a translator, who is a newsroom worker who makes abundant use of translation. You see, if you go and work in a news agency, then you are not a purely translating worker, okay? You are not translator proper. You have to engage with, and this is why I am talking about media. We have not reached the point to talk about translation now, yeah? That's okay. But it is good to have the theoretical background so that you are familiar when you are in the field, okay? Newspapers headlines. These are very important element, okay? A headline is important because it directs your understanding and it attracts your eye to roll down the whole article. A headline can give an insight into the whole news stories, hence the translator's extra attention to the translation of the headline. Headlines are different in their phrasing, in terms of grammar, in terms of vocabulary. Headlines have indexical functions. Indexical functions, they point to you where to go, okay? We have four types of headlines: statements, questions, commands, and explanations. Okay? The major concern of media translation is news in printed or electronic media outlets with increasingly growing reference to electronic or digital media. A translator who intends to enter the world of media translation should have some knowledge about the rules that inform the way headlines are phrased, the types of headlines, small, large. In print media, the headline must be so brief. In digital media, they give themselves a space, okay? Because digital media gives more space, okay? So in print media, the headline used to be and is economical in the number of words, but with the advent of digital media, where spaces may not be as restricted as in print media, headline can be longer and contain more vocabulary. Look at this. We have this text from the BBC, and it's about COVID-19 before it became so famous. The English text: new Chinese virus will have infected hundreds. In Arabic: فيروس صيني غامض، تقديرات تجاوز عدد المصابين، الأرقام المعلنة رسمياً. It is the same report, but in English, the headline is different from the Arabic headline. Also, if you look at the paragraph, the number of people already infected by the mystery virus emerging in China is far greater than official figures suggest, scientists have told the BBC. Of course, in Arabic, you start with what the sentence ended in English. قال علماء لBBC إن عدد المصابين بالفيروس الغامض الذي اكتشف في الصين ربما يتجاوز الأرقام التي أعلنتها السلطات في بكين إلى حد بعيد. Okay? You don't have سلطات in the English text. You have official figures. Official means رسمي. Okay? And then there have been nearly 50 confirmed cases of the new virus, but UK experts estimate the figure is closer to 1700. وكشف الفحص المعملي في الصين. Okay? الفحص المعملي is not existent in the source text, and it stands for confirmation. Okay? حوالي by the way, حوالي, there are certain media outlets do not believe. This is a very good. This is the glossary now. Remember the glossary I talked to you about? Glossary here. Certain media outlets would not opt for حوالي as a translation for some. Okay? Or nearly. They opt for نحو. Okay? شخصا بيقول لكن خبراء في المملكة المتحدة يرجحون أن عدد المصابين حوالي نحو 1700 شخص. So there is a difference here. This is the meaning of trans-editing. A person who does this is a journalator. He knows English, he knows Arabic, and he puts the Arabic text in a way that is appropriate in Arabic according to his overview, according to his... I want you to go to roll down these parallel texts and detect the differences. Two people are known to have died. وأعلن عن وفاة مصابين بهذا المرض الغامض. لاحظ وأعلن. known. ما قالش وعرف. Okay? You continue doing the same, carry on the same way. وفرضت سنغافورة وهونغ كونغ فحصا طبيا على المسافرين جوا إليهما من مدينة ووهان الصينية مع إعلان الإدارة الأمريكية إجراءات مماثلة بداية من الجمعة الماضية في مطارات نيويورك. Look at the English. Singapore and Hong Kong have been screening air. Okay? Screening air passengers from Wuhan, and U.S. authorities announced similar measures starting on Friday. There is no much difference here, but it is good to see how linkage is working also, playing وفرضت سنغافورة. Okay? screening. There is a bit of glossary aspect here. وفحص تطبيق المسافرين الجملة الماضية. By the way, certain outlets would not write الأمريكية like الأمريكية here. They would write it الأمريكية. The Egyptians and the Palestinians, we all use الأمريكية. While in Lebanon, in Lebanese media outlets, you wouldn't find الأمريكية, you would find الأمريكية. So this is a glossary. So when you translate for a Lebanese media outlet, it is very important to take care that أمريكية is not أمريكية, it's أمريكية with the E after the M, the meme, عفوا. Now with the grammar, as we have mentioned, I'll stop here for now, and then we are going to continue with the headlines, with the grammar of the headlines and the translation of headlines into Arabic, with other examples from English and Arabic. For now, see you soon.